The flavour of the week is bottles, part of my bottle collection here. The ones on the front here are a curious balancing trick. You can have them with full bottles of wine, but I've actually, for safety, put them in with empty bottles of wine. But you've got a little wedge here, and this exactly balances, but only just like that. Sometimes you can get them to rock. And it appears to be defying gravity, but it's not, of course. It's actually balanced, and the centre of gravity is just where the base is there. When you put it down, it stands up. This is a more elaborate one, which appeared quite recently, in fact. It looks like a couple of slightly drunk butlers holding the bottle of wine. Again, it can be a full bottle of wine. This one's an empty bottle of wine, and it's a little way of posing your wine before you actually drink it. So bottle balancing. Then the first few bottles here are all ones which originally did have wine in them, and one of them still has. And the first one I've got is called Chateau Migraine, given to Eric, who ran a wonderful novelty restaurant in Destelberger in Belgium. And it's a vin village, but just in case the bottle itself, the wine, misbehaves, he's thoughtfully given you an aspirin to go with it. I love that idea. Chateau Migraine. I once had a thing called Chateau Plonk, but unfortunately I gave it away. This one also had a wine in it. One of my siblings gave this to me. It's from the Crooked Vine. That's a lovely name for a label, isn't it? And it had a very nice red wine in it. But it's, of course, the bottle itself is made crooked, which is a quirky thing, so I have to keep that for my collection. Wish I could have tasted the wine. Then there's a wine trick which you can do if you're in the middle of a session with friends in a pub. Having drunk the wine, you can make a little bar trick, and the bar trick goes like this. You place it upside down so it's just balanced. You place a coin on the top. You put a banknote underneath to make it attractive, and ask people how can they remove the banknote without touching the bottle or without touching the table. And there's at least 3 ways of doing it. I'll show 2 of them. So one's a bit of a cheat. So you're not allowed to touch the bottle, not allowed to touch the table, and you just do a little chop action like that. Very clever. Alternatively, what you can do is to take the banknotes, put the thing on top, it's got to be balanced, and you roll up the banknote with your fingers, so you're only touching the paper, and you just gently reach this bit here. I'm pushing it forward, and I can push it forward until it comes off the banknote. If you're feeling really cheatsy, one of my lateral thinking friends said, all you do is you ask a friend to pick up the bottle on your behalf, and you share the goods between you. Well, that's a problem anyway. So there's quite a number of bar tricks which you can use once you've drunk the wine, and that's an example of them. There's another very quirky one over here, which is a whiskey bottle. This is a series called Frozen Moments. And there's, I think I've got in my collection, which, get that balanced. There she blows, just there. Frozen Moments. Australian came up with these back in the 1970s, I think it was. This is glass, and this is glass. This is some sort of plastic, I guess, but it's a wonderful appearance. It looks like marvellous in the back of a bar, I would say. So there's some wonderful, crazy stuff out there. And then there's bottles which have been converted into other uses. This one obviously was a real bottle of wine, but then what they did was they removed the base like this and put a cork in it, and inside there they put a whole bunch of delicious truffles, chocolate truffles, all looking like corks with foil on them. They were delicious, but unfortunately I've eaten them all. But that was a nice way to use a bottle of wine as a chocolate box. That's quite a clever idea. There's one which has never been a bottle of wine, and this is again a favourite theme. It's actually a candle. There's the wick. Looks very realistic. It was given out at Christmas time. I think keep calm at Christmas. But this was never actually a bottle of wine. It's actually made of wax. You've got to be a little bit careful. You don't damage it. But that's a very, very nice bit of artwork. Sometimes they made labels which you put on the bottle of wine. That's already a funny one, but you can put a label on it. And this is popular in the 1980s, I think it was. They would allow you to put on something very jokey on the bottle of wine, which would be a normal vin village or vin ordinaire, I think it was. And they gave out a whole bunch of these. I bought 3 at the time, but I was aware that there were several dozen being produced, and they had a sticky back, and you simply slapped them over the bottle of wine when you took it round to your friends for a dinner party. That was quite a clever idea. So those are the ones which really had wine in them. Then at the back we've got some designer ones here. This is my favourite designer one. This is quite astonishing. It's actually a glass bottle with a glass inside it, and the base of the bottle and the base of the glass are the same thing. And one of my mathematical friends invites me to serve up a glass of negative wine, where you have nothing in the actual glass but wine on the outside, and then you're telling people you can have the wine but not in the glass, it's got to be outside the glass. It's superb bit of craftsmanship. I've never actually used it. I'd have to use pipettes and straws, I guess, to make sure that I didn't actually get the wine spilled in the wrong direction. And then another idea, it looks like a glass, but actually, this way it looks like a glass, it's actually a little dispenser for wine, because this base here is a top, and this is completely sealed, so you can actually dispense some wine in there, or vinegar or something like this, and then pour like that. So, very clever use and a designer for glass. The Klein bottle, one of my favourite things, but I never liked the shape of the Klein bottle. It reminds me too much of things you use in hospital beds. Never mind that. A friend of mine, anyway, thought of the idea of putting a stem to make it look like a wine glass, and this is something we've had on the website for some time. And there is one trouble with this. They make them in all sizes. In fact, my friend made a lovely miniature version for one of my birthdays, that one there. But the trouble is, if you put real wine in there, and I do love to use things, you'd have a devil of a job trying to clean this. How on earth do you clean it? So I've never tried putting liquid inside them. What I did discover, though, is you can put these little caraway seeds, which they give away at Indian restaurants when you've had a mouthful of curry, and you simply dispense a few of these in your mouth, and it helps to freshen your breath. And those are completely clean, of course, and they won't in any way discolour or cause trouble with the glass. Once they're empty, they're empty. So it's a good way of using up what is already a very clever bit of artwork, but it's making a good use of it. There's some jokey ones out there, which is one of my friends made some time ago. I feel it's Frank Potts it was. I feel it ought to really say, in case of emergency, break glass. But it appears to be a genuine corkscrew for a bottle of wine, and if you're at a picnic and you haven't got one, what do? You'd have to break the glass, I guess. Then coming up to high art, there's some very strange ones that the Chinese have got involved with, and also I think the South Americans are into this. This is taking a bottle. This one here was a little, I think it was probably, it looks like a penguin, but I think it was a little scent bottle. It's genuine glass. The top comes off, there's the penguin's head. But the clever thing about this is, this has been painted on the inside. And to do that, they get these fine brushes with curves to them and spend many, many hours decorating these superbly on the inside. Quite astonishing. There's another version over here which is not a bottle shape, but it's a sphere of glass, but it shows the idea. You have to get your brushes in there and you make this superb artwork on the top, but the bottle is what we're thinking about, so that's the one I draw to your attention. And there's his head back on again. Another art form is to put sand in them. This goes back to my childhood days. Alum Bay sands on the Isle of Wight in southern England was available for decades. This is a much cleverer form of artwork. I think what they do here, they told me, is when the bottle's completely empty, they get little curved brushes, as they're using for this art form, but glue on it and do the shape with a bit of tiny thin film of glue of the black bit to form the palm leaves. So you then fill it completely with black sand, shake it, and then empty it, and the bit that's attached to the glue stays and the rest of it comes out, and then bit by bit you add in extra colours. So sand in bottles taken to a much, much higher order. Then there's puzzles. The simplest puzzle I've ever come across, this one here, was actually Kellogg's cornflakes produced this, and it had milk in it. And the idea was the kids, as they're drinking their milk and having their bowl of cereal, could have a little maze to play with, which is a clever idea. It's interesting how they've got a nice sort of, I can feel it slightly embossed on the outside surface of the glass, so it's very firmly fixed. But it originally had milk in it, and then it's a puzzle for kids to enjoy. And then there's a load of clever ideas where you're supposed to do something clever with a bottle like this. This one here, you're supposed to get this small wooden ball in the neck there, and this dowel gets in the way, and how do you do it? And I don't think I've ever solved that one, so I must leave it. Over here is one of my favourite ones, which is apparently insolvable, because you've got a tube going in from the neck, which is firmly fixed, it's glued in. You've got a little red lozenge, and you're supposed to get it down the tube, and you can go like this for about 2 years before you'd be lucky enough to get it to sit in. But fortunately, you're given a thing saying solution to it. That's a help, isn't it? Except that when you open the envelope, you have a piece of paper which just says the same word again, solution. How the devil is that supposed to be a solution? When I first got this, I had to put it under ultraviolet, and I had to heat it up from thermochromic ink and tried to see if there's secret writing, put some lemon on it. There was no writing on it at all. You're supposed to have a way of solving it just using this paper and get that out. It's a good old mystery, that. Ships in bottles. I'd never actually had a ship in a bottle myself. It was too normal, I suppose. So the cartoon that appeared in Omni magazine all those years ago was a lovely inversion of a bit of surrealism. You're supposed to imagine this man has got in the bottle somehow. Now he's making the ship outside the bottle. When he's finished, he's got to get out of the bottle himself. How the heck does he do that? So I haven't got a ship in a bottle, but that's a cartoon which reminds me there is a genre, and this is a sort of inversion, highly surrealistic. Message in bottles. I've never had a message in the bottle. I've been beachcombing many times. The only thing I've got by way of a sop to myself is this one here, which is nothing more than just a little gimmick for advertising. You take the thing out and there's an advertising bit. It's an advertising promotional thing. But you do read of people finding things on beaches, messages in bottles, and some of my friends even put messages into bottles and then they send them out into the wide world. What happened to them thereafter, I don't know. One of the most amazing things in bottles was the work of Harry Eng, which is this last section over here. And this stuff is really something else. There are some much more amazing ones. There are rather tame ones I've got here. But his famous, iconic thing was a little knot here. And this wonderful man, Chinese-American, who died in 1996, made the most astonishing things inside bottles, almost like a sort of intellectual challenge. So these are the ones he gave me. And this was the last one, just before he left to go back to America, which he gave me with his famous knot inside. But his decks of cards with bolts going through it, and I don't know what else, are just Harry Eng taken to a perfection, really. The guy was an outstanding genius at creating impossible things inside bottles. So there's a little overrun of some of the bottle novelties I've got. I need to think whether I can move on to plastic bottles next. But these are at least glass bottles, and there's a lovely range of them.